Deep within the heart of Vatican City, an independent sovereign state nestled within Rome, stands an edifice of stone and silence. It is not the grandeur of St. Peter's Basilica that commands the most profound awe from those who truly understand, nor the vibrant artistry of the Sistine Chapel. It is something far more austere, far less accessible, yet infinitely more potent. The Vatican Apostolic Archive. For centuries, it was known by an even more evocative title, the Archivum Secretum Apostolicum Vaticanum, the secret Vatican archive. The very name whispered of hushed revelations, of truths meticulously guarded behind towering walls and impenetrable protocol. Imagine the sheer scale, some 85 kilometers, 53 miles of shelving, stretching through subterranean vaults and climate-controlled chambers, holding documents that span over 12 centuries of human history. These are not merely dusty records. They are the tangible remnants of empires rising and falling, of religious schisms tearing continents apart, of scientific breakthroughs challenging ancient dogmas, and of the private thoughts of popes, kings, and commoners caught in the relentless tide of time, from parchment scrolls to leather-bound folios, from meticulously sealed papal bulls to fragile, handwritten letters. The archive is a frozen ocean of information, each wave a fragment of the past. The aura of mystery surrounding the archive is no accident. It is fundamental to its very purpose. Established formally in the early 17th century by Pope Paul V, it was conceived as the private archive of the popes. This meant its contents were not for public consumption, nor even for general scholarly access, but for the exclusive use of the Holy See. Its security measures, both physical and administrative, have always been legendary. Heavy iron gates, intricate locks, and an unyielding chain of command protect its vast treasures. For centuries, access was severely restricted, granted only to a select few high-ranking cardinals and trusted researchers, each vetted with extreme caution. The very concept of a secret archive, maintained by an institution as globally influential as the Vatican, immediately provokes an undeniable sense of intrigue. What secrets are so vital, so potentially disruptive, that they require such intense, centuries-long protection? Why the labyrinthine halls, the miles of unseen shelving, the meticulous cataloguing that takes years to master even for the initiated? It is not simply about preserving historical documents. It is about controlling the narrative of history itself. The archive is more than a passive repository. It is a living testament to the Church's enduring power, its unwavering commitment to its own version of truth, and its profound understanding of information as the ultimate currency of influence. Every sealed document, every carefully indexed file, represents a decision made, a secret kept, a truth shaped by the most powerful religious institution in Western history. Researchers who gain limited access, even in recent decades when the secret was removed from its official name, often describe a profound sense of awe and frustration. The process of requesting documents is arduous, requiring precise knowledge of what one is seeking, often relying on cryptic old indexes. Only a tiny fraction of the total collection is truly open, and only under strict supervision. The vast majority remains unseen, its contents known only to a handful of Vatican archivists and, presumably, the highest echelons of the Holy See. This deliberate obscurity fuels speculation. Is it protecting the Church from embarrassment? Is it safeguarding sensitive diplomatic treaties? Or does it conceal revelations that could fundamentally alter our understanding of Christianity, of history, or even of humanity's place in the cosmos? The mystery of the Vatican Apostolic Archive is not just about what it contains, but why it remains so fiercely guarded. It stands as a silent monument to the enduring power of hidden knowledge, a question mark etched into the very stones of Vatican City, and for those who dare to ponder its depths. The first chilling realization is that its voluminous contents are far from purely theological. extending deep into the intricate, often brutal, tapestry of political power and papal authority, beyond the hushed reverence of sacred texts. The Vatican Apostolic Archive houses a staggering testament to his kind of power, the immense, often ruthless, temporal and political influence wielded by the papacy throughout centuries. Its labyrinthine halls are not merely repositories of theological treatises, but silent witnesses to the Church's strategic role in shaping nations, dethroning kings, and orchestrating the delicate, often brutal, dance of European politics. These documents are the echoes of empire, meticulously preserved. Imagine the sheer volume of correspondence letters from monarchs pleading for papal blessings or cursing papal interference, treaties drawn up between warring states, mediated by the Pope's legates, detailed accounts of diplomatic missions, espionage, and alliances forged and broken. This is not the spiritual realm of dogma, but the cutthroat world of geopolitics, where the popes were not just spiritual leaders but formidable secular rulers, commanding armies, administering vast territories, and wielding the ultimate weapon of excommunication against defiant sovereigns. Consider the age of monarchies in Europe. Every king, every emperor, despite their earthly might, often sought the anointing, or at least the tacit approval, of the Pope. The archives hold the original bulls of excommunication that could plunge kingdoms into chaos, releasing subjects from their oaths of fealty. They contain the meticulous record of the investiture controversy, where popes and emperors battled for supremacy over the appointment of bishops, a struggle that defined the relationship between spiritual and secular power for centuries. These are not abstract historical events. They are meticulously documented in the brittle pages and elegant scripts within the archive's vaults. The vastness of the diplomatic network recorded in the archives is truly staggering. The popes maintained active diplomatic relations with virtually every state of consequence across Europe, and later, the world papal nuncios, acting as ambassadors, sent back detailed reports on the political climate, the internal struggles of kingdoms, and the characters of their rulers. These dispatches, often coded or encrypted, provided the Holy See with an unparalleled intelligence network, allowing them to anticipate shifts in power, exert leverage, and strategically intervene in international affairs. The archives hold these secret reports, detailing everything from succession crises in distant lands to the strategic movements of armies. Take, for instance, the intricate negotiations surrounding pivotal historical events. The archives likely contain the full, uncensored story of the Protestant Reformation, not just from a theological perspective, but as a colossal political struggle. They would hold the complete exchanges between Henry VIII and the papacy regarding his annulment, revealing the raw power plays and desperate manoeuvring on both sides. They would detail the efforts to rally Catholic monarchs against the burgeoning Protestant states, and the strategies devised to reclaim lost territories and influence beyond Europe. The archives also hold the records of the Church's engagement with the Age of Exploration. Papal bulls divided newly discovered lands between competing colonial powers, effectively legitimizing global conquest under the banner of evangelization. The records would show the petitions from newly established colonies, the appeals for missionary support, and the internal debates within the Curia over the treatment of indigenous populations, though often filtered through a lens of colonial ambition. The meticulous cataloguing of financial transactions within the archives also speaks volumes about the Church's temporal power. Records of vast sums of money collected from tithes, indulgences, and church lands, and how these funds were used to finance wars, build cathedrals, support lavish papal courts, or fund diplomatic ventures. These ledgers illuminate the economic engine that underpinned the Church's political might. The existence of such comprehensive documentation, locked away for centuries, underscores a critical aspect of historical control. To control the narrative of the past is to shape the understanding of the present and the possibilities of the future. The Vatican, more than perhaps any other institution, understood that knowledge was power, and that keeping certain information inaccessible was crucial to maintaining its moral, spiritual, and political authority, revealing the full scope of its political machinations, its alliances with despots, its strategic compromises, or its moments of weakness, could profoundly alter public perception of its infallibility and divine mandate. The contents pertaining to political power and papal authority are not merely historical curiosities, they are a chilling reminder of how interwoven spiritual claims can become with temporal ambition. They demonstrate the immense pressure on the Church to maintain a monolithic, divinely sanctioned image, even when its actions in the political arena were pragmatic, brutal, or self-serving. And for those who are drawn to secrets, the sheer volume of these political documents, so meticulously preserved, yet so tightly guarded, speaks volumes about the enduring weight of history and the careful curation of institutional memory. Yet, beyond the realm of kings and popes, the archives also hold darker, more unsettling records, the ledgers of the Inquisition, detailing the systematic suppression of thoughts and beliefs deemed too dangerous to exist. From the gilded halls of diplomacy, the Vatican Apostolic Archive descends into a far darker, more chilling realm, the meticulous, horrifying records of the Roman Inquisition and its predecessor, the Holy Office. These are not documents of negotiation and treaty, but ledgers of accusation, interrogation, torment, and systematic intellectual and spiritual suppression. Here, the Church's power was exercised not through subtle diplomacy, but through fear, coercion, and the relentless pursuit of ideological purity. Imagine mile after mile of shelves containing the grim minutiae of human suffering and dogmatic enforcement. These are the detailed transcripts of trials for heresy, meticulously recorded by scribes. They include the accusations levelled against individuals, the testimonies of witnesses, often anonymous, the questions posed during interrogation, sometimes under torture, the specifics of which are chillingly detailed, and the pronouncements of guilt or acquittal. For those who dare to delve into these records, the very paper seems to emanate the whispers of condemned souls. Consider the sheer breadth of beliefs deemed forbidden. The Inquisition's reach extended far beyond overt challenges to papal authority. It targeted deviations in theological interpretation, mystical experiences deemed too personal or unmediated, scientific theories that contradicted biblical literalism, and even folk practices suspected of sorcery or paganism. The archives hold the documented cases of countless individual scholars, mystics, peasants, and even high-ranking clergy whose thoughts or practices diverge from the ever-tightening grip of orthodoxy. One of the most infamous examples, whose full, unredacted records are almost certainly within these vaults, is the trial of Galileo Galilei. While widely known, the complete correspondence, the private deliberations of the cardinals, and the specific pressures brought to bear on the brilliant astronomer who dared to champion a heliocentric universe would offer an unparalleled glimpse into the Church's struggle to reconcile scientific discovery with theological dogma. The archives would lay bare the intricate theological arguments used to condemn a scientific truth, revealing the depth of the Church's fear of intellectual challenges to its perceived infallibility beyond individual trials. The Inquisition's ledgers also chronicle the systematic condemnation and destruction of forbidden texts. The Index Librorum Prohibitorum, Index of Prohibited Books, maintained for centuries, listed works deemed dangerous to Catholic faith and morals. The archives would contain the dossiers on why specific books were placed on the index, the theological arguments, the debates, and the papal decrees. These files reveal the anxieties of an institution determined to control the flow of information and thought, to shield its flock from ideas deemed corrosive or heretical. They are a haunting testament to the meticulous, deliberate efforts to shape knowledge by preventing access to it. The records also touch upon the Church's deep engagement with what it perceived as the occult, trials of alleged witches, sorcerers, and those accused of demonic pacts would fill countless volumes. While modern understanding might dismiss many of these as products of superstition and societal paranoia, the Church took them with grim seriousness. The archives would contain the theological justifications for exorcisms, the collected lore on demonic manifestations, and the detailed observations of phenomena that defied conventional explanation, revealing a Church deeply invested in a spiritual battle against unseen forces. What these records unveil is not just historical detail, but the profound psychological impact of an institution wielding absolute power over the spiritual and intellectual lives of millions. The meticulousness of the Inquisition's documentation highlights its strategic intent to leave no room for doubt about who defined truth, and to serve as a stark warning to future generations. These aren't just dry legal papers, they are saturated with the echoes of fear, confession, and the crushing weight of institutional judgment. The contents of the Inquisition's ledger are secrets no one is allowed to see in their entirety, precisely because they lay bare the brutal mechanisms of power. They expose the human cost of doctrinal purity, the intellectual compromises made in the name of faith, and the Church's unyielding determination to suppress any narrative that threatened its authority. To grant full, unfettered access to these records would be to invite a raw, unvarnished confrontation with a period of history that continues to cast a dark shadow over the Church's moral legitimacy. It would open wounds that some would prefer remain sealed, and for those drawn to secrets, the unspoken truths within these ledgers whisper of even deeper anxieties, the possibility that within these very vaults lie other narratives of faith, forgotten gospels and apocrypha, deemed too dangerous for anyone to read. Beyond the records of earthly power and the grim ledgers of suppression, the deepest mystery of the Vatican Apostolic Archive, for many, lies in its potential to harbour the very texts that were systematically erased from the Christian narrative. Whispers persist, among scholars and seekers alike, that within its miles of shelving, amidst papal bulls and diplomatic missives, might lie copies, or even original fragments, of lost gospels, apocryphal works, and alternative Christian narratives that were deliberately excluded from the biblical canon, a hidden library of forbidden faith. Imagine the early centuries of Christianity not as a monolithic, unified movement, but as a vibrant, often chaotic, tapestry of diverse communities, each with its own understanding of Jesus, its own revered texts, and its own unique cosmology. The discovery of the Nag Hammadi Library in Egypt in 1945 undeniably proved the existence of numerous other Gospels, like the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary, and the Apocryphon of John, texts that offered starkly different portraits of Jesus, his teachings, and the path to salvation. These texts were not marginal oddities, they were once widely circulated and deeply influential in various early Christian circles. The question then arises if such texts existed, and were actively condemned and destroyed by the emerging Roman Church. What happened to the copies that fell into the hands of the very institution that sought to suppress them? It is a tantalizing possibility that the Vatican Archive, acting as a repository of all documents relevant to the Church's history, including those it deemed heretical, might hold invaluable examples of these very texts. For an institution that meticulously records even the smallest detail, it would be strategically logical to collect copies of the very heresies it intended to fight and refute. To understand an enemy, one must know their arguments. Consider the historical process of canonization. This was not a swift, divinely inspired act, but a protracted, often contentious process spanning centuries, heavily influenced by theological debates, political pressures, and the need for doctrinal uniformity. The Council of Laodicea, c. 363 CE, Athanasius' Easter letter of 367 CE, and the Councils of Hippo 393 CE and Carthage 397 CE represent key moments where lists of accepted books were promulgated. Texts that did not align with the emerging orthodoxy, those that emphasized gnosis over pistis, elevated female apostles, presented a dualistic cosmology, or contained a different understanding of Christ's divinity or humanity, were systematically excluded. What if the archive holds the Gospel of the Nazarenes, a lost Aramaic gospel mentioned by early church fathers, possibly representing a form of Christianity closer to its Jewish roots, or complete copies of the Gospel of the Ebionites, which portrayed Jesus as a mortal prophet, rejecting his divine pre-existence? The theological impact of such discoveries, offering alternative foundational narratives, would be immense, challenging centuries of established doctrine. The archive might also contain multiple, variant manuscripts of texts that are in the New Testament. The canonical Gospels themselves have textual variants, some significant. What if the Vatican holds older, more complete, or even radically different versions of familiar passages that were deliberately altered or suppressed to fit a particular theological agenda? The very idea of an original text is often complicated by the dynamic nature of early manuscript transmission. Beyond Gospels, there is the possibility of other apocryphal acts, epistles, and apocalypses that circulated widely in early Christian communities but were later deemed non-canonical. These texts, while often fantastical, sometimes contain unique insights into early Christian beliefs about angels, demons, the afterlife, and spiritual practices. The Vatican's collection of these documents would be invaluable for reconstructing the full, diverse tapestry of early Christian thought, a tapestry that the Church ultimately simplified and controlled. The secrecy surrounding these potential holdings is understandable from an institutional perspective. If new, authoritative texts of Jesus' sayings or the early Christian movement were to emerge from the Vatican, directly contradicting established dogma, the very foundation of the Church's historical and doctrinal authority could be undermined. It could destabilize centuries of theological interpretation and challenge the infallibility of the canon itself. The speculation that the Vatican archives hold such texts is fueled by logical deduction to refute heresy. One must possess it. To ensure its absolute disappearance from public memory, one must control all copies. The archive, in this sense, would be both a vault of preservation and a tomb of suppression. For the truth seeker, the thought of such documents locked away, unseen, is both tantalizing and profoundly unsettling. It suggests that our understanding of Jesus, of early Christianity, and of the very origins of our faith might be incomplete, shaped by a deliberate act of historical selection. The silence that surrounds these potential holdings is deafening, a testament to the immense power of an institution that chooses what truths are revealed and which remain forever hidden. And as we consider these profound theological secrets, we are drawn to even more esoteric realms that the Vatican has meticulously documented. Its investigations into the unexplained, the occult, and the very fabric of spiritual warfare. Beyond the political machinations and the grim ledgers of heresy, the Vatican Apostolic Archive descends into a realm that blurs the lines between faith, folklore, and the truly inexplicable. Here, within the hallowed silence, lie records pertaining to the Church's long, complex, and often chilling engagement with the unseen world, its meticulous investigations into unexplained phenomena, alleged miracles, exorcisms, and perhaps even its collected knowledge on occult practices, demonic lore, and spiritual warfare. This is the shadow side of faith, a testament to an institution that has grappled with mysteries far older than its own founding. Imagine dossiers filled with reports from remote parishes detailing inexplicable occurrences, statues weeping blood, inexplicable stigmata appearing on devout individuals, visions of the Virgin Mary or saints, and cases of seemingly miraculous healings. The Church, in its role as arbiter of divine intervention, takes these claims with utmost seriousness. The archives would hold the full, confidential investigations conducted by church commissions, the testimonies gathered, the scientific examinations performed, often by skeptical medical doctors, and the eventual pronouncements, whether of authentic miracle, natural explanation, or outright fraud. These files would reveal the often rigorous, sometimes surprising, methods used to discern the truly inexplicable from the merely coincidental. But the archive's engagement with the unexplained veers into far darker territory, with its extensive records on exorcisms and demonic possession. For centuries, the Church has been the foremost institution actively confronting what it perceives as genuine demonic influence. The archives would contain not just theological treatises on demonology, but detailed, first-hand accounts of exorcism rituals performed by priests across the globe. These documents would include the alleged symptoms of possession, the methods used to discern genuine cases from psychological illness, and the verbatim exchanges with entities believed to be demons, their names, their boasts, their threats, and their reactions to sacred rites. Consider the sheer accumulation of demonic lore, while the canonical scriptures provide a foundational understanding of fallen angels. The Church's long history of exorcism and spiritual warfare has undoubtedly led to a vast, accumulated body of knowledge about demonic hierarchies, their methods of attack, the specific prayers and rituals effective against them, and the theological reasoning behind their existence and power. These are not merely theological abstractions. They are practical guides born from centuries of confrontation with what was perceived as literal evil. The archive likely holds manuals, field notes, and classified research compiled by demonologists and exorcists, insights too sensitive or too potentially disturbing for public dissemination. Furthermore, the archives might contain the Church's own investigations into occult practices, not just for the purpose of condemnation, but for understanding. From the Renaissance onwards, esoteric practices like alchemy, astrology, numerology, and various forms of magic flourished, often intersecting with mainstream thought, the Inquisition, as mentioned in the previous chapter, actively prosecuted practitioners of such arts. The files would not only detail these trials, but potentially contain the very grimoires, magical texts, or alchemical treatises seized from accused individuals. For an institution dedicated to understanding and combating spiritual threats, possessing and studying such forbidden knowledge would be illogical, albeit unsettling. Strategy. The concept of spiritual warfare is not metaphorical for the Church, it is a profound reality. The archives would reflect this, documenting not just the theological framework, but the practical history of the Church's perceived ongoing battle against the forces of evil. This could include reports of specific locations deemed spiritually afflicted, patterns of demonic activity observed across regions, and even the strategic deployment of blessings or sacred objects to counter perceived dark influences. The reasons for keeping such records deeply secret are manifold. Public access to highly detailed exorcism accounts could be deeply disturbing, potentially fueling mass hysteria, misinterpretation, or even fascination with the very forces the Church seeks to repel. Information on occult practices, if too widely disseminated, could inadvertently serve as a guide for those seeking to engage with them. Furthermore, the meticulous documentation of alleged miracles, while intended to establish authenticity, might also contain details of investigations where no supernatural cause was found, or even outright fraud was uncovered, information that could undermine faith if presented without careful contextualization. For those drawn to secrets, the contents pertaining to unexplained phenomena and demonic lore are among the most tantalizing and terrifying. They speak to a Church that has confronted the edges of human understanding, not just through theological contemplation, but through direct, often harrowing, experience. The silence around these documents is not just about institutional reputation, it is about protecting the faithful from potentially overwhelming truths, guarding against fear, and maintaining control over the narrative of the unseen world. And as we ponder these profound spiritual confrontations, we are reminded that even the highest echelons of the Church, the popes themselves, held secrets of their own, carefully guarded within these very walls. Within the innermost sanctums of the Vatican Apostolic Archive lies a collection of documents arguably more sensitive, more intensely guarded than any other the private records of the popes themselves. These are not merely administrative decrees or public pronouncements, but the intimate correspondence, the personal confessions, the confidential reports detailing internal church conflicts, moral failings, and strategic decisions that shaped history, often concealed from the public gaze. Here, the immense power held by the papacy intersects with the profound humanity, and sometimes frailty, of those who wielded it. Imagine the layers of secrecy enveloping these documents. Unlike broader administrative records, these files often relate directly to the Pope's personal spiritual lives, their ethical dilemmas, their secret negotiations, and the sometimes ruthless political maneuvers undertaken to safeguard the Holy See or advance its interests. These are the records that, if fully exposed, could radically reshape perceptions of papal infallibility, divine mandate, and the moral integrity of the Church's highest office. Consider the private correspondence of the popes, letters exchanged with trusted confidants, personal diaries, notes from private audiences. These documents will reveal the popes not merely as towering, infallible figures, but as complex individuals grappling with immense burdens. They might contain unvarnished opinions on contemporary monarchs, candid assessments of rebellious cardinals, anxieties over theological schisms, or personal doubts about their own leadership. These are the human whispers behind the divine pronouncements, providing a rarely seen glimpse into the pressures and temptations of ultimate power. Perhaps most explosively, the archives may contain records of papal confessions or private spiritual direction, while the sacrament of confession is sacrosanct and protected by the seal of the confessional. Historical accounts suggest instances where popes sought spiritual guidance that, due to their unique position, might have generated unique, confidential documents. These could reveal profound moral struggles, strategic compromises made under duress, or even acts of sin that were absolved privately but never publicly known. The very existence of such records, if they survive, would be a testament to the weight of the papacy's responsibilities and the human cost of wielding such immense spiritual authority. Beyond the personal, these private papal records would illuminate the hidden mechanisms of internal church conflicts. Imagine the full dossiers on power struggles within the College of Cardinals, the machinations surrounding papal elections, the secret investigations into the corruption of powerful bishops or religious orders, and the often brutal methods used to silence internal dissent or enforce disciplinary measures. While some of this is known through secondary sources, the archives would hold the raw, uncensored documents, the accusations, the evidence, the backroom deals, and the ultimate resolutions, revealing a church sometimes as politically cutthroat as any secular court. Consider the records of strategic political decisions made under intense pressure, often with immense moral implications. During the World Wars, for example, what private deliberations occurred within the Vatican regarding its stance on atrocities, its diplomatic maneuvering between warring powers, or its efforts, or lack thereof, to protect persecuted minorities. The archives would hold the full, unexpurgated truth of these pivotal moments, revealing the strategic calculations and the moral compromise that define institutional survival in times of global crisis. The correspondence of popes like Pius XV during WWF remains a subject of intense debate. The archives would provide the definitive account. For better or worse, the sheer volume of records detailing the Church's financial dealings over centuries, often shrouded in extreme secrecy, would also be found here. While some financial records are publicly accessible, the truly sensitive agreements, the covert investments, the handling of controversial funds such as those from indulgences or specific papal taxes, and the financial leverage exerted in geopolitical contexts would undoubtedly reside in the deepest vaults. These documents could illuminate the economic underpinnings of papal power and its entanglement with secular wealth. The reason for the intense secrecy surrounding these papal records is clear: to expose the private struggles, the political pragmatism, the internal divisions, or any past moral failings of the popes would be to undermine the carefully constructed image of an unbroken, divinely guided, and infallible succession. It would humanize figures elevated to near divine status, potentially shaking the faith of millions who rely on that perceived infallibility. It would also reveal strategic information that the Church, as a continuing global actor, deems vital to its ongoing operations and diplomatic influence. For those captivated by the interplay of power, faith, and the human condition, these specific archives represent the Holy Grail. They promise not just historical facts, but a profound psychological insight into the burdens of absolute authority and the secrets that even those claiming divine inspiration choose to keep. The silence of these thousands of volumes is deafening, a testament to the weight of suppressed truths that continue to shape, in unseen ways, the very foundations of global institutions and beliefs. And the question remains, how do these closely guarded secrets, in their very concealment, continue to exert an unseen influence on the present? The Vatican Apostolic Archive, with its miles of guarded documents, is not merely a historical curiosity or a treasure trove for conspiracy theorists. Its very existence, and the profound secrecy surrounding much of its contents, exerts an unseen but potent influence on contemporary religious discourse, historical understanding, and even the broader secular perceptions of power and truth. The secrets it holds, by virtue of their concealment, continue to shape the present in ways more profound than often recognized. Imagine the absence created by silence, when an institution as ancient and influential as the Vatican chooses to meticulously guard certain narratives. It effectively creates a void in public knowledge. This void is not empty. It is filled by speculation, by assumption, and by a reinforced perception of institutional power rooted in the control of information. The mere knowledge that secrets exist, whether political intrigues, controversial theological debates, records of extensive exorcisms, or potentially variant gospels, lends a certain mystique and an almost unchallenged authority to the official narrative that is presented. The Church's version of history and doctrine gains weight precisely because the full context, the dissenting voices, and the potential counter-arguments remain locked away. Consider the ongoing debates within modern Christianity, questions about the role of women in the Church, the nature of papal infallibility, the Church's stance on scientific discovery, or its historical moral compromises, all revisit issues that are undoubtedly richly documented within the archives. The inability of independent scholars to fully access and analyze these primary sources means that contemporary discussions often proceed with incomplete information, relying on published narratives that are inherently curated. This allows the Church to maintain a controlled narrative, shaping both internal reforms and external critiques by limiting the foundational evidence. The hidden knowledge in the archives also influences the academic landscape. Historians and theologians are perpetually aware of the immense gaps in their understanding that these inaccessible documents might fill. This awareness affects research questions, interpretive frameworks, and the very scope of what can be known about certain periods or controversies. It subtly reinforces the Church's position as the ultimate arbiter of its own history, retaining a monopoly on vast swathes of primary source material. This control over historical evidence grants it a powerful, albeit often unstated, advantage in shaping scholarly consensus. Furthermore, the existence of these deeply guarded secrets plays a role in public trust and skepticism. for many outside the Church, or even among its disillusioned members. The Vatican Archive has become a symbol of institutional opacity and a perceived reluctance to confront its own past honestly. This perception contributes to broader distrust in established institutions, fueling a general cynicism towards official narratives, whether religious or secular, the secrets of the Vatican, whether they truly hold explosive revelations or mundane administrative details, serve as a potent symbol of hidden power and controlled information in an age that increasingly values transparency. The unseen influence also extends to the realm of spiritual imagination. The very idea of the archives holding records of the occult, detailed demonology, or the inner workings of spiritual warfare taps into deep human fascinations with the metaphysical and the unknown. This fuels a pervasive cultural narrative that portrays the Vatican as a guardian of ancient mysteries, a player in an ongoing cosmic drama. This narrative, while often sensationalized, imbues the Church with a mystique that transcends its public image, subtly affirming its historical engagement with forces beyond the material realm. Finally, and most profoundly, the Vatican Archives, by their very nature, pose a lingering question about truth itself. Is truth something to be protected, controlled, and dispensed by an authority, or is it something that should be universally accessible, discovered through unfettered inquiry? The enduring secrecy of these vaults implicitly suggests the former, reminding us that knowledge is power, and that the power to conceal is often as significant as the power to reveal. The silence within the labyrinthine halls of the Vatican Apostolic Archive is not empty. It is pregnant with the weight of centuries, with the echoes of decisions made, lives impacted, and narratives reshaped. It continues to haunt the present, a silent, formidable monument to what remains unseen, unspoken, and perhaps, for reasons known only to a few, forbidden. What other secrets, known only to a chosen few, continue to shape our world from behind veiled walls? The question lingers, awaiting those drawn to peer beyond the surface.